My name is Andy Mallon. My pronouns are he, him. If you would like to get a copy of these slides, you can go to am2.co/free-pizza, and you can grab the slides. Like I said, my name is Andy Mallon. I sell furniture at the mall. I'm database architect at wayfair.com. If you are in the US, Canada, England, UK, Germany, you have probably seen all of our commercials on the internet. If you're from someplace else, we may be coming to a geography near you with our home furnishing and decor. Frankly, none of my technical skills, though, matter today because this is not a technical session. What's probably more pertinent to this session is that I am unabashedly queer. I make no qualms about it. I hate racism, homophobia, bigotry, and having to disable my ad blocker to read a news article. I love inclusive communities, helping others. I'm a dog dad. We have 2 dogs. I mentioned on the intermission that Daisy might bark during the session, and if she does, hopefully she isn't too disruptive. And I love Oxford commas. I am team Oxford comma. If you want to get in touch with me, frankly, the best way to get in touch with me is through Twitter. Tweet at me at am2. My DMs are open. You can also visit my blog or email me. I'm a little less responsive in email. I get a lot of spam, quite frankly, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to dig through it all. At the bottom of the screen is also my Twitter and email address, so you can get to me anytime. You will notice my email works if you spell out the number 2 or use the numeral. And I have these instructions for menti.com at the bottom of the slide. If you go to menti.com and use that code, I have 3 questions that I would love to have folks provide responses to. And then if you have questions, please ask them there. I will not be responding to those questions during the session. I'm going to gather up those questions, and I will provide responses to anything that is on topic for this session. And I'll publish those on my blog in the next few days, within the next week, depending on how many questions I get. You can also use the chat in Zoom to ask questions there. And at the end of the session, in the time that I have left, I should have about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the session where I can respond to those questions live. So depending on whether you want my response in that last 15 minutes, or if you want my response written out on my blog, you can choose either spot. And feel free to ask in both places as well. I will close the Menti questions tomorrow morning. So if you think of something later on, feel free to come back and ask on that Menti website. I want to thank GroupBy. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank GroupBy for having me here and for doing such a great job at building a welcoming, inclusive community. They put a lot of thought into it, including having sessions like this be a priority to talk about how we can be more inclusive in what we do. They're really putting a lot of effort into doing things and not just talking about things. And I really appreciate that. So what are we going to do? We're not going to have free pizza. We're going to talk about free pizza at some point, but that's not what we're here for. We're going to learn some jargon. Jargon that gets used when talking about diversity and inclusion and related topics. We're going to steer clear of definitions, though. I'm going to try to teach you what these words mean without going through dictionary definitions, because I think it's easier to learn what some of these words mean than to learn how to define them. Sometimes attaching the words to the meaning is a little bit hard. And specifically, a lot of people talk about diversity, and I personally think that starting at diversity is completely the wrong approach. Diversity is the end goal. Diversity is where you get when things are done successfully. But to have a diverse environment, to have a diverse community, you need to do stuff to achieve that. So we're going to talk about focusing on some of those other things, on how to be welcoming, how to help people feel that they belong. And we're going to talk about equity, inclusion, some of those other things that lead to diversity. When you go to a tech session, one of the important things is usually that the person who's speaking is talking about their own personal experience. If someone hasn't done that thing in the real world, they don't have as much credibility as someone who has. So I'm going to talk specifically about my personal experiences as a queer man and how those experiences lead me to this worldview. So I am talking specifically from my experience. Hopefully that lends to my credibility as I tell these stories. Your goals for this are first and foremost to listen. I mentioned I'm not taking questions until the end, and that's a key part of this. I want you to focus on what I'm saying and really kind of immerse yourself in thinking and listening to the stories that I tell and what I have to say. Both of us, we share a goal of being humble in approaching the topic of diversity and inclusion. No one here knows everything. No one here is perfect. And we should approach the conversation knowing that. I don't have all the answers, neither do you. And then the last two things, which is my primary goal, is to help everyone here bring their whole self to this community, to the GroupBy community, and to other communities, to help you bring your whole self. So that's my goal. I want to be able to help you bring your whole self to this community so that you can be included. And we're going to start with a story. This happened about 2 months ago. My husband and I got this letter in the mail. I'll read it to you. It says, "Neighbor, you fly your flag. How about the American flag first, which gives you the freedom to fly your flag?" And it's signed Fulton Street Neighbors. Oof, you can imagine what it feels like to open a letter that says something like this. Now, the flag that they're talking about is the pride flag. My husband and I have flown kind of back and forth the pride flag, the American flag in front of our house for the almost decade that we've lived in our neighborhood. And this year, we got this letter in the mail. And you feel a lot of emotions when you get a letter like this. It's personal. I would have loved to have been able to respond to the person and have a conversation with them, use this as a starting point for a conversation. But since the letter was sent anonymously, I didn't have that option. I wasn't able to write a return letter, go knock on their door. So what I did is ordered a lawn sign, or two. One, I had their letter printed so that anyone who walked by could see the letter that we received. And then I wrote a response. And the response, which I'll let you read, is that the pride flag isn't our flag. We don't fly the pride flag because we need everyone in the neighborhood to know that there's gays that live in this house. We fly it because we want to let people know that we are a welcoming house, that we support our community, not just the community that we live in, not just our neighborhood, but also the LGBTQ community. There's a lot of LGBTQ kids in the country who aren't loved and accepted by their family or don't feel loved and accepted by their family. And it's unfortunate that youth suicide in LGBTQ kids is the leading cause of death. So there is a real problem on queer kids feeling welcome and accepted in this world. And flying that flag in front of our house is just a very small thing that we can do to help improve their worldview, help improve their ability to be accepted, to feel that they're accepted, to feel that they have worth. It's a tiny little thing. It doesn't take anything from us. We spend $15, $20, buy a flag, put it up, leave it outside till it gets kind of weather worn, and then we get a new one. No big deal. But by doing that, we're showing that we're allies and we're looking out for others. And tucked in at the bottom of that sign is this Bible quote, which I actually think is one of the most fantastic definitions for what it means to be an ally that I've ever read. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also the interests of others. That's it. When people talk about being an ally, allyship, that's all they're talking about. They're, look out for others, look out for your neighbors, look out for the other people in the community. Now, the pride flag itself, if you're not familiar with it, it was first created in the 1970s, and the rainbow is originally the red through purple rainbow, that's it, represents the different groups that make up the LGBTQ community, lesbians, gays, bisexual, transgender. But over the years, there have been other variants of it, all around the idea of being more inclusive. The blue, pink, and white represents the trans community. The black, brown represents the, depending on the flag, the black, brown, indigenous people of color. But the idea is always the same, that this style of flag represents that a symbol of being inclusive and being welcoming. And it's changed over the time to ensure that it's being welcoming and inclusive to folks. Now, I don't know the intent of the person that sent that letter to us, but it's bullying, plain and simple. It tells me that I can't celebrate who I am, and it's telling me not to be an ally for others in my own community. And if you think about what that letter, the words in that letter, it's a 2-sentence letter, it's telling me that I can't celebrate my queer community and still be part of my neighborhood community. And that's not right. That's not what building an inclusive community is about. Communities overlap, they intersect. And if you want to build an inclusive community, you need to keep in mind that some people will be part of many different communities, and they're going to bring those other parts of their other communities into this one. Now, it would be kind of a bummer of a story if it ended there, but in the weeks that have followed, we've gotten more letters. We've watched people walk by, stop with their kids. Parents had teaching moments with their kids about what it means to be inclusive. We've had people knock on our door to voice their support. And we've heard much more supportive things than we have anything else. So all of these letters of support are all letters from allies. They're all people telling us that they are supportive of us. They are, like that quote said, they're not just looking out for their own personal interests, they're looking out for the interests of others. So this story, leading with the story, is because these are kind of jargony terms: belonging, otherness, othering, intersectionality. They're kind of as buzzwords. And you don't need to know how to define them in words. You can define them, you can hear these terms, and if you look back at the story, you can point to the part of the story that is about othering or feeling otherness. You can point to the part of the story about allyship. And that's the important part. Don't feel like you need to be able to write a dictionary definition for these things. Just be comfortable with being able to spot them. It's kind of like that famous or infamous United States Supreme Court ruling where they define pornography as you know it when you see it. Some of these terms are kind of like that. You'll know it when you see it, even if you can't put the words on it. So when we talk about community too, and I've hinted at this already, there's lots of different types of community. Here, we are representing the SQL Server community and the GroupBy community. You are also part, everyone here has a neighborhood that they live in, that they're part of that community in some way. Most of us have an employer. Some folks have a church or a religious community that they're part of. There are communities around disabilities and different abilities, and cancer survivor communities, and communities about diseases and learning disabilities. I've mentioned the LGBTQ community. These are all communities that we belong to, and they're all built around different things. They're built around who we are, what we look like, where we live, things we do, hobbies we have, things we like. And all of these things are different parts of community. And when we're part of more than one community, that's where they intersect. And when I talk about bringing your whole self, it's being able to bring those other parts with you too. So here's a list of some of my favorite jargon that I will undoubtedly use during the course of this. I don't know how many times. I have definitions in the slides, and I'm going to zoom right past them because we're not going to read definitions. That would make for the most boring session of the day. Go to am2.co/free-pizza and download the slides, and you can check them out in detail and study up. Some less boring versions of it. Diversity is having a seat at the table. Inclusion is having a voice. Belonging is having that voice be heard. These are from a website called Liz and Molly, where Liz and Molly both blog. I think that those are really good ways to think about what these concepts are. Putting a presence, putting a voice, and belonging is, they define it as having your voice be heard. I almost think of it differently. I think of belonging as it's a feeling that we have. So it's the feeling that we have when our voice is heard. So my version of it is the diversity is people who don't look or live like you. If I have a party and everyone that comes to the party looks and lives like me, they're all, all my queer tech nerd friends that live in the neighborhood, that's not a diverse party. And when we think about the things that make us different, that make people look different, or they live different lives, those are all aspects of us that lend to the diversity of our community, our work community, our workplace, our virtual community, like GroupBy, like the SQL Server community. Inclusion is the ability to bring your whole self. You aren't included unless you can be you. That's it. The ability to be yourself and to be your whole self. I'm not included unless I can, remember when conferences were a thing and you'd have lunch and hang out with people in between sessions? When those in-person conferences were a thing and I'm standing around talking to people at lunch, I'm not included unless I can talk about where I'm going on vacation, where my husband and I had dinner. And if I am not comfortable talking about my husband, well, that's it's a big part of my life. I spend 80 hours a week, or 40 hours a week at work, and 40 hours a week during the weekdays, at least 40 hours at home. And then, 40 hours sleeping, and now the Monday through Friday is gone. Other than your coworkers, your spouse is one of the most important parts of your life, if you have a spouse. Being able to talk about that's important. And belonging is that feeling that you are a part of something and not apart from it, which makes more sense when you can see it written than when you hear it out loud. But being a part is to be separate from it versus being a part of it and being one with it. So you'll feel belonging if you are included. Earlier this year, there were also, there's this graphic, it made its way around social media many, many times, so many times that it was actually hard to find a decently high quality version of the graphic because everything had been copied and pasted and was low quality. But this is another thing that talks about some of the key concepts of defining these terms, getting the feel of the meaning of them without having to put words around it, right? We don't need to, whoops. I swear I know how mice and clickers work. So inequality, that's kind of easy to get the vibe of, right? This is when the person on the left has plenty of apples, the person on the right has none. That's something that we get. Most people get that. Equality, question mark. Oftentimes we think of equality as everyone gets the same tools, everyone gets the same thing. In a myopic look at the situation. Oh yeah, you guys both have ladders. You're both good. If both people have ladders, is it an equal opportunity? One of them has a ladder and is using the side of the tree that has lots of apples. The other is on the side of the tree that is both higher and has no apples. But they've both been given the same tool. That isn't really fair. Maybe it's equal. But again, if you look at it just in the moment, it may be equal. But when you take a big step back, it's really not, it's not equal, it's not fair. Then the next progression on that is equity. A lot of, you hear equity and equality used interchangeably a lot, but they're not quite the same thing. That there is a definite difference. Equity means that you identify that there's an unlevel playing field, and then you provide tools to even that out a little bit. So in this example, you get a taller ladder. Excellent. You can reach the apples now. But still, is it fair? So you've got a taller apple, you can reach the apples on your side of the tree, but there are fewer apples. You're on the shady side of the tree. All the apples are growing on the sunny side of the tree. The tree is growing to lean towards the sun. Since the tree is leaning towards the sun and the sun is always on the same side, you're never going to have the same access to apples, even though you've been given this taller ladder. And again, with that first step back, this is better. It improves the situation, but it's still compensating for that uneven playing field. The last frame in this graphic is about justice. And the idea around justice is that you've figured out, you've put the Band-Aid on it with some sort of equitable solution to make it so that you have a better opportunity, but you figured out where the system is wrong. You figure out how to level the playing ground, the playing field fundamentally, so that both people have equal access to, in this case, apples. And you've straightened the tree. You figure out, maybe you cut down the bigger maple tree over here to the side, which I guess you're looking at it over here to the side. But you're looking at evening that playing field so that now there are apples growing on the entire tree. The tree is growing straight. You don't need a taller ladder anymore. You don't need something to compensate for that uneven playing ground. And that's when you've achieved justice. That's when having equality is actually fair. Because if you have equality for the situation on that uneven playing ground, then equality still isn't fair. Once you've achieved justice, then equality becomes fair. I'm going to come back to allyship again, because it's really important. Most of the people, or all of the people, watching this have an opportunity to be an ally for someone. There is a group or a person who needs an ally to help level that playing field, or to help make them feel that they belong in a certain situation. And the reason that it's so important, this concept is so important, is that if underrepresented or underprivileged folks could fix their problems, they would have done it by now. Women don't want to get paid 81% of what men make in the United States. That's not like their goal to just make 20% less. They want to get paid the same thing. They sure are trying. They need allyship to get beyond it. Queer folks don't like to be teased or taunted. Race relations in the United States, not exactly the best situation. And minorities aren't like, they don't love it. They would love to fix it. They would love to have equal opportunity. And having allyship can help those groups overcome injustice, because overcoming that injustice by yourself is somewhere between hard and impossible. A tiny little story, one bullet point this time. My husband is 5'4". He cannot reach the top shelf in the kitchen. When he's putting away the dishes, if there's something that goes on the top shelf, he just leaves it on the counter so that I can put it away. If there's stuff that he uses often, his coffee mug is on the bottom shelf so he can reach it. It's a simple act that overcomes the fact that he's a short guy and he can't reach the top shelf. I can help him. I can rearrange some stuff to make sure that his coffee mug stays on the bottom shelf where he can reach it easily. And I don't put all of the Oreos on the top shelf where he can never get to the Oreos. The Oreos go someplace where he can reach them too, because that's fair. It's not fair to say, oh, well, the Oreos were in the kitchen. It's not my fault you couldn't reach them. We'll come back to that argument, the not my fault argument, in a little bit. Speaking of simple acts of allyship, this is one of my favorite ones that I'm a big proponent for. When I introduced myself at the top of the session, I said, "Hi, my name is Andy Mallon. My pronouns are he, him." Nobody doubts that my pronouns are he, him. You hear my voice, you look at me, I've got a big bushy beard, I look like a guy, so I use traditionally guy pronouns. That's the assumption everyone is going to make. Not everyone uses the pronouns that are attached to their physical appearance or their initial physical appearance. Not everyone uses traditional he or she pronouns. Not everyone's pronouns are immediately obvious from their physical appearance. There's lots of different combinations. I might have even covered most of them. I don't share my pronouns because you need to hear my pronouns. I share my pronouns because there are people that need to share theirs. And if I'm part of that conversation and I share my pronouns and say, my name's Andy, my pronouns are he, him, the other person in the room, in the conversation, is now comfortable to introduce themselves the same way. I'm being an ally by saying something that, like, I don't want to say it's a throwaway phrase, but it's like so simple that it takes no effort on my part. It's basically the opposite of peer pressure, or the good side of peer pressure. If I'm in a meeting at work and I introduce myself as, oh yeah, I'm Andy, my pronouns are he, him, and there's someone in that meeting who uses they, them pronouns, or not so much in the US, but especially in Europe, Z is a very common gender neutral pronoun. And if that person is using those pronouns, now they're comfortable to say it, and they're not the only one. They don't feel otherness because they're the only one that shared their pronouns. So you'll notice that on my slides, in my email signature, in my bio, I include my pronouns to make it easier for those that need to. It's easy. It takes almost no effort. It's a very simple act that means a lot more to someone else than it means to me. And that's one of the things that we forget when we're trying to be inclusive. The things that matter most to the person who feels excluded, who feels othered, the things that mean the most to them are often a really simple act on your part. And your conduct, the things you do, the things you say, those little things add up. It can sometimes be death by 1,000 cuts. Lots of simple things that make you feel completely left out and ignored. And when you try to bring them up, you feel like a petty little, I don't know what, like a petty little child complaining about tiny little things. But there's 1,000 tiny little things that make you feel left out, that make you feel different, make you feel other. And if people just take those things into account, whether it's a gender neutral bathroom or using pronouns, those simple things mean a lot to someone else. And if you want to be welcoming, you need to think about some of those little things. Think about the words that you say, the things that you do. Sometimes your actions speak louder than words. I mentioned at the top of this how I'm really proud about the amount of effort that I see the GroupBy committee putting into trying to build an inclusive environment. I see Blythe join the call now. She's one of the people that this is a top priority to GroupBy, to do things so that the community is welcoming to everyone. And that's as important or more important than words, than talking about it. But all of those things all combine to building an inclusive and building a culture, an entire culture, the whole community, top down, the entire company, the entire community that's welcoming. This is usually the time when someone says, oh, but I'm not going to walk on eggshells for everyone. I can't be careful about every little thing I say. Nope, you can't. But you can put in some effort. It's not a binary thing. It's not, I am thoughtless, or I spend every ounce of my day trying to be more welcoming and more inclusive. It's a gradient. And frankly, there are some days or some situations when you have more effort to put into others. And there are other times when you do need to be selfish and think about yourself and put yourself first and not care about helping others. And that's okay. If I may be vulgar for a moment, you only have so many fucks to give, but you do have fucks to give. So you can put in effort and be comfortable that you're doing something. You might say something wrong or do something wrong, and that's okay. If you're mindful of what you do and say, and you're also comfortable that you'll say something wrong, then you're opening up a door for conversation and for including folks. That's where, for events like this, codes of conduct come in. Codes of conduct are there to help underrepresented groups feel included. If you are a cisgender, heterosexual, white Christian male living in America, you are not underrepresented, and you probably do okay at feeling included. The code of conduct isn't so much for you. I mean, it's for everyone, but it's setting expectations for everyone in how you interact with each other. And in particular, for people who witness something or are on the receiving end of something that is unkind, unwelcoming, or abusive, it tells them where to turn, and it tells them what to expect and as a response. Remember the J word at the top, justice? It's kind of like a system of justice. It tells you if something is wrong and you're one of the people who is facing an uneven playing field, what do you do when something goes wrong? Who do you talk to? And what do you expect? GroupBy has a code of conduct that rolled out, I guess, a couple of months ago now, Blythe? Yeah.
That's right, yep.
And I guess I helped that.
You can say that. Just a little bit.
I did not write it. Most of this was written by someone else. I came in and consulted on some of the language choice and some of the points on it to help around making it inclusive. But here's the key part. This is the main crux of the whole thing. GroupBy is dedicated to a harassment-free experience where you can be you, where everyone can feel welcome to attend. That's the point. Mm-hmm. All the other stuff that's in here, the whole longer part, is like the implementation details of how that happens and what to do when that goes wrong. And this is the thing. This part of the GroupBy Code of Conduct is something that I encourage you, dear attendee, to think about in your day-to-day life. Are you creating a harassment-free experience for people, regardless of who they are, so that they can be them?
Well, and I think that it's important to note too that I used to work for a number of sponsors and companies in the SQL Server community. And I remember when PASS rolled out their anti-harassment code, and there was a lot of pushback, like a lot. And it always struck me as like interesting because it's like, well, you should just know that if something happened at an event that we would deal with it. Why do we need this? Why do we need this? And then the sponsors, well, we're having a karaoke event. Why? Or we're having a pub night. Why do we have to sign something that says we're going to deal with this? Of course we deal with it. We don't want to sign it. It just really tells someone what happens if. Yeah. Here's what happens. Here's what you can expect. We're going to treat you in this way, and here's who's going to find out, and here's how we're going to deal with it. And it provides a sense of stability and predictability for often traumatic experience. That's what
and for someone who is either worst case abused, but just someone who is feeling unwelcome, who maybe doesn't even know if they want to go to an event because they might feel unwelcome because of this thing that makes them different. A code of conduct is there to let that person know that we take it seriously. And you can often tell from reading a code of conduct whether it's boilerplate or it's something that's a little bit more thoughtful. And it tells that person, no, you are welcome. In a way, and actually, no, I take back my in a way. In order to be equitable, it does mean that the person who is underrepresented gets a leg up. And if you don't think that that's fair because you are you're the person on the ladder with all of the apples, and the other person has the same ladder and the same tree, it's not your fault they don't have apples. That's a you problem, right? That person deserves a fair shake, and codes of conduct like this are really designed to make sure that person gets a fair shake.
And thank you for helping us.
Yes, thank you for including me. This next section is about some difficult conversations that you have to have. I have these US and Canadian content warnings here for two reasons. One, I'm going to swear in this next section. And while I know that swearing is sometimes unwelcoming to folks, I'm going to do it anyway to drive home some points. And this represents the warning that I will do that. Number two, these difficult conversations you need to have around diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging, we have to be mature about them. We have to be mature adults. And if you're not going to be mature, then I'm not going to engage in a conversation with you. As I said earlier, I only have so many fucks to give, and I don't have time or energy to have conversations with someone who isn't going to approach the topic as a mature person. The number one most important difficult conversation you can have is when you fuck up. Now, we're mostly data professionals. I am a DBA, and I always tell people when I'm doing tech talks and people ask about mistakes or whatever, you are not a senior DBA if you haven't caused and also fixed a production outage. As far as I'm concerned, you're a mid-level DBA until you break production and then fix it yourself. The same thing goes with these conversations about inclusion. You aren't really fostering those inclusive conversations. You aren't pushing your own limits and learning if you haven't fucked up and had to admit it. Have those conversations. You're gonna say something, I've said this earlier, you're gonna say something wrong, and that's okay. Have a conversation to follow up with the person. If it's a coworker and you have a conversation and you think you offended them, just check in. It's not a comfortable conversation for either person. But we learn when we make mistakes. And admitting it is the first part of solving a problem. Admitting that there is a problem is the first part of solving it. Whether that's admitting that you said the wrong thing to a coworker and you have to go apologize or something else, that's an important thing. When you have those conversations to tell someone, oh no, I fucked up, remember that that person doesn't know your intent unless you tell them. I don't know the intent of the person who sent me that letter that I showed in the first story I told. I don't know if they wanted to be a bully or not, but I said, they're a bully. Now, maybe if they came and knocked on my door and we had a conversation, I would find out what their real intent was. And it may be a productive conversation, but you have to tell them what you meant. And as you tell them, people often joke, oh, you better stop talking now. You're just digging yourself a deeper hole. But you have to have some of those conversations in order to figure it out. And if you can find common ground and talk your way out of it, it's going to be uncomfortable, but you'll both parts, sides of that conversation will grow from it. Another really important thing is don't be defensive in this conversation. I said earlier, be humble in how you approach these things. You're not going to be right all of the time. Be comfortable with that. I'm going to take the example that someone says you're racist. Maybe it's at work. Maybe it's in your personal life. Someone says, that's racist. Ask them why they think that. What did you do that made them think that that was your motivation? Keep in mind that accidental racism might still be racism. Like you might have done a racist thing even if that wasn't your intent. You might have been offensive without realizing it. If you can have that conversation, you can find common ground, then you can build on that common ground and you can explain like what you meant and that you didn't know. Ignorance is a thing. We don't know everything. That means we're ignorant to certain things. If you can clarify your intent and pledge to do better next time and then do better, that is the most we can ask when you fuck up. As a DBA, I'm going to take down production eventually. Hopefully, whatever I do doesn't take down, working at a large e-commerce company, hopefully I don't take down the entire website. If I do, hopefully I never do it again. And here's the thing, at work, we screw up all the time. We make mistakes, we cause outages, we drop the wrong database, drop the wrong table, run something without a where clause, and we make mistakes. And then we learn from it. Because when you get that feeling, when you get the flop sweat, when you run a query, you hit F5 and you made a mistake, and you start to get the heat on the back of your neck because you know you screwed up, that's something that you don't want to do again, and you learn so that you don't make that same mistake again. The same thing goes for these conversations with your coworkers when you said the wrong thing and you offended them. Don't be defensive. Don't be like, oh no, I meant to drop that table. No, like, yeah, oops, I made a mistake. That's not what I meant. This is my perspective. Tell me your perspective. Find the common ground. Learn something. Because you don't know everything. And you need to listen to other people's experiences. Their experiences are real. Believe them. Don't be dismissive. My friend Drew Fergwell said this, I think it was yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday he said this, talking about people who are dismissive about the existence of bigotry. It feels like the social equivalent of works on my machine. It is. When someone says, oh, well, I mean, I'm a gay guy. No one makes fun of me for being gay. There's no such thing as homophobia. What? No, there is. Just because you don't see it or experience it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And in particular, if there's someone that's part of a different community, and in that other community, they experience something that is different from you, who are not part of that community, where's your expertise to tell them that they're wrong? They experienced it. They have expertise. You should listen to them. You can have a constructive conversation about how you don't see that, how that doesn't happen to you, how you don't understand it. You may never understand it if you don't experience it. I've been called a faggot before. I frankly don't know anyone who is a gay man who hasn't walked down the street wearing, holding a partner's hand, wearing some article of clothing that somehow makes it apparent, or just by existing, who hasn't been called that word from a moving car. It happens, and it sucks. Don't tell me that it doesn't happen. Don't tell me that homophobia isn't real because you haven't had that happen to you. Because it does. My experience says otherwise. On a similar topic, I was on TikTok last week because I am still a millennial, and I'm going to read this first before I put it up. This video, which if you download, you can play, but I'm not going to play it this evening. All the TikTok says is him. It's him, and he says, to be gay is to be recommended holiday destinations by family and friends, which you can't actually go to because being gay is illegal in that country. And if you went, you'd get beaten, arrested, or something worse. That's real. That happens today in 2020. Well, I guess no one's really going on vacation in 2020, but you get the idea. I'm not planning a safari to Africa because I'm not safe. I'm not going to go to a conference in Houston because I don't feel safe there. There are places that are not safe for me as a gay man. There are places that are not safe for a woman. If I said, oh, just take a cab home from the bar, it's fine. Well, at 2 a.m. at last call, many women aren't going to feel comfortable getting in a cab by themselves. They're not going to feel safe. That's not an experience that I necessarily have, at least not in Boston. anyone who's ever seen Avenue Q, there's which is a Broadway show that is an adult Broadway show with adult language and adult themes, but it's puppets. It's based off of, it's a making fun of or a parody of Sesame Street. In that, there's a Black character, and when they're talking about cabs, he says, "I can't even get a taxi," which is another thing that maybe we don't think about. I don't always think about the fact that as a white person, I can stick up my hand and get a taxi. If I was a different color, depending on where I was, what time of day, what I was wearing, taxi might not even stop for me. It's important to listen to those lived experiences of other people. And when you have something that you don't understand, to have one of those difficult conversations. All right, let's talk about some unwelcoming behavior, and then we're going to talk about what we can do. And I've got another story coming up too, because I love stories. So unwelcoming behavior, things like, I call them separate but equal policies. I'll come back to that in a minute. Gatekeeping. This is another jargony word that we'll try to define through a story. And bad faith arguments like this one, which I also pulled from Twitter just this week. Richie Rump said, "Since we started unit testing, our bug count is up. We should stop unit testing because it creates more bugs." Now, I'm not going to get political and point out who Richie is making fun of, but anyone who pays attention to American politics knows exactly who Richie is making fun of. He's making this bad faith argument in jest because the politician who said something very similar was also making a bad faith argument. And he made the nerd tech version of it. So let's talk about that first thing I said, separate but equal policies. This is where diversity is like at the separate opt-in experience, where the diverse crowd is segregated into these separate groups. And this might be at work where all they do about diversity is tech. Oh, they've got a women in tech group. Oh, there's a Black in tech group. There's an Asian in tech group. There's a LGBTQ resource group. And they're all kind of separate, and there's nothing else about diversity. It's just what happens in this group. You know what? I don't need to talk about queer issues with queers necessarily. It's like, I actually need to find out more about what's affecting Black, Indigenous, Brown, people of color. I need to find out what's happening, like what issues are affecting women. Those are the kinds of things that I need to hear about because those aren't my experience. I'm an expert on being gay. I've been doing it for 30 some years. When companies or communities segregate diversity like that and delegate diversity to the group, and they don't have this top-down, bottom-up running through the whole organization approach, it doesn't help. It's kind of like a token motion. And Blythe came off mute because she's going to say how important it is that GroupBy has this top-down whole organization bottom-up thing. Because you know who's not welcome at GroupBy? Someone who is actively excluding others. That's probably the exception to people who are feeling to including others. Go ahead, Blythe. Did you end?
I worked at PASS when we had the SIGs, the special interest groups, and then they turned into virtual chapters, and it kind of went from 6 things to 18 things. When I left, there were like 35 of them. I was in such great faith. And then once it started going into inclusivity, it seemed like such a good idea, right? It seemed like when we did the WIT group, we were the first ones to do the WIT group in 2008, 2007. So awesome. But then all of a sudden we were, you look at it and you're like, wait a second, we just
And-
put everybody in a corner and we're like, here you go. You go and talk
Yeah,
amongst yourselves, women.
and
You know?
it can be a difficult
Yeah.
kind of fine line, because those resource groups are really important. Those resource groups are there to help peers, help the people in that community meet others in their own community, who are, not the SQL Server community, but those other communities that people are part of.
Mm-hmm.
Meet those other people, share your experiences, and help each other in that part of the community, the same way that we talk about tech topics, and the tech topics help each other. But you're not really building an inclusive and diverse community unless there's the other stuff too, and unless there's, it's everywhere, and you're thinking about it in all aspects of your community.
Interesting.
The other kind of anti-pattern with behavior is gatekeeping. These are all things, I swear to God, I have witnessed people be told that they are the wrong kind of gay. They're not Latina enough. They're not a real DBA. And what gatekeeping is it's forcing people into the boxes based off of stereotypes, right? Like,
I'm a marketing person in the SQL Server community. I mean, nobody is not a real DBA as much as I'm not a real DBA.
Right.
But I belong here. You're not getting rid of me.
but like, these are things that people say seriously, right? I'm too gay. I'm not gay enough. I'm the wrong kind of gay. I don't do this right. Well, that's gatekeeping. Like, people are individuals. Everyone does their own thing. All gatekeeping does is it reinforces a feeling of otherness. It makes the person feel different because they don't fit some stupid ideal that someone else made up. And it prevents them from being their whole self. If I am too butch to be gay, well, that's who I am. If I'm too effeminate to be gay, then that's just who I am. That's not, it has nothing to do with being gay, frankly. And just like whatever might cause someone to say that someone wasn't Latina enough, which I witnessed of a coworker, that's bonkers. There's, in that case, there's some pretty definite genetics in play that figure that out, not anything that has to do with actions. Bad faith arguments is my favorite, and this is where my next story comes in. These are some common bad faith arguments. It's hard to be a white guy in tech too. She could get that promotion if she just tried harder. If you don't like what I do, then you should stay home. And this wonderful gem from Joris, from Richie. These things are not something that you can have an argument about, because either they're just demonstrably false, or they're designed to force you to argue about some sort of dumb minutia rather than talking about the real topic. And often they deflect whatever the problem is back to you. Oh, this is your problem. And you can't have a logical conversation with them because they're not based on logic. These arguments are designed to have a fight. They're just picking a fight. They're not having an honest, humble conversation to find common ground and learn something. They're just there to either piss you off, make you fight, waste your time, deflect, whatever. Whether it's intentional or not, that's what those bad faith arguments do. So now story time. I love this story. So in 2004, 2007, that was the time when in Massachusetts, there was a battle for marriage equality. This graphic on the right is about a documentary about that time span. And what happened was our Supreme Court had the state Supreme Court had ruled that under the Constitution, marriage had to include same-sex couples. And there was a movement to amend the state constitution, which, proud lifelong Bostonian, Massachusetts state constitution is the oldest continuously enforced constitution in the world. It is older than the US Constitution, and other countries have either changed their constitution or had some sort of government interruption for some reason. I was very involved in advocating for my future right to marry my husband. We hadn't met yet. I was dating someone different at the time, but the idea that I wanted to be able to get married just like my parents had. In that documentary, Chris Muno, who was the lead of an anti-gay organization called the Massachusetts Family Institute, said this: same-sex marriage degrades the value of my marriage. It says to me that my uniqueness as a man, as a husband, and as a father is irrelevant. This is not just a bad faith argument, but it's gatekeeping, because he's saying that everyone's marital relationship has to be just like his. What about couples that don't want to have children? Can they still get married? Does that interfere with his relationship, the uniqueness of his relationship? Is he saying that my relationship with my partner isn't unique enough to warrant being recognized by the government as a marriage? He takes a very myopic and the last almost 20 years, 15 years would prove incorrect worldview that discounts my worth, the worth of LGBTQ individuals, and our relationships that we have. It's designed to force you to argue about something else, argue about a different topic, rather than discussing whether same-sex couples deserve the legal rights as opposite-sex couples. One of the key arguments during that time was that we can give gay couples, same-sex couples, civil unions. We'll write a law that says there's this thing called civil unions, and if you are a same-sex couple, you get this. And we'll write the law to say every law that applies to marriage applies to civil unions. But if you're a heterosexual couple, you get married. And if you are a gay couple, you get civil unions. Sounds like a great compromise, right? And there's a quote in that documentary that says, if we have to say it's a civil union, it's just making us different. If they want to say it's the same thing, they should use the same word. We want all the same rights, and we want to be able to use their word too. I said that in that documentary. I still feel the same today. When you're talking about being inclusive, language is important. Language has meaning. If you force someone to use a different word because they're different, you're forcing them to feel different in addition to being different. And that is a form of othering. And it goes against that concept of inclusion and making people feel like they belong. What do you care? What do you care if I'm married to Kenneth or Kendra? It doesn't actually affect Chris Muno personally, but it affects me quite a bit. There was another aspect to that marriage equality fight where there is a lot of advertising from especially the furthest of right wing of the religious right that was making it an us versus them battle, where it was, if you're a good Christian, then you're against gay marriage, which forces Christian parents to choose between being supportive of their gay children and their own religious identity. And that's shitty, right? Make someone choose between their parents and themselves. Like, it's a really shitty thing. Not to mention, it's not mutually exclusive to be like Christian or gay. There are a lot of gay Christians, and now you're forcing those people to choose between two huge parts of their own self-identity. And it's a bad faith argument that goes directly at that intersectionality of who we are. All right, so what the fuck can I do, Andy? You've talked about all of this stuff. There's lots of stuff you can do. I've mentioned some things too about how you can be more inclusive. But this is a really big point, and this goes to the one of the first things I said about if underrepresented groups could fix their problems, they would have done it by now. It's not enough to just be not a bigot yourself. You need to be anti-bigot. That's, whether it's if you witness homophobia, if you witness racism, if you witness ageism, say something, help someone, be an ally. Keep in mind that socially acceptable bigotry changes with time. In the 1960s in the US, blackface was socially acceptable at like college parties. It's come up in the news a lot lately. It's no longer socially acceptable. So the excuse of, oh, well, that's the way it was done, isn't an excuse. It was socially acceptable in the 60s. It's not now. It was racist in the 60s, and it's racist now. We've just figured it out as a society that it was racist and it's not acceptable. Society is going to keep moving forward. As a millennial, I can attest that we are going to, society is going to keep moving forward. Gen Z as well tends to be more accepting with each generation. That means that everyone has to keep moving. Everyone has to keep learning. We'll never be great. We'll always have something to learn to be more socially acceptable. To be more accepting, because what is a societal norm is going to change. The first thing that you can do is to study. Do your own legwork first. I mentioned earlier that when GroupBy was making their code of conduct, they had something put together before they asked me to help. That is really important. It shows that you're invested. There are links at the end of this that I encourage you to read. If you are on the distribution for Brent Ozar's weekly links, you got an email on Monday that is his weekly links this week were curated by me, and they were all about belonging and inclusion. Read those. They're also included at the end, that slide at the end. Read them, listen to them, and think about them. That's what you can do to study. Listen to others. I told you that today that was your most important thing to do. Listen. Have those humble, constructive, and difficult conversations with your friends, with your coworkers, with your spouse, with anyone that'll listen, with your neighbors. Have those conversations about being more welcoming and about how you aren't, and maybe you don't know what to do, and that's okay. Just have those conversations. It helps to talk things through. Think of it as rubber ducky debugging for yourself, for self-help. And be mindful of your words and actions. I could do a whole session on things like word choice. Saying that's a dumb idea versus I don't understand that idea. That's not even about who a person is. That's just like being more welcoming to everyone in some of your word choice. And that can mean a whole heck of a lot to be mindful of that and to be mindful of people's reactions. Maybe it's your habit to say, that's a dumb idea. Well, you know what? Maybe you should stop, because you're going to make the person feel like they're an idiot. And it's not that they're dumb. It's not that the idea is dumb. It might be that you don't understand it. Or maybe it is like kind of a dumb idea. But brainstorming, one of the keys to brainstorming is to have dumb ideas. In marketing, that is a key to brainstorming. I'm sure Blythe could do a whole hour just on that one concept of dumb ideas. You say dumb ideas and then you build on them. So build on it rather than saying no. All right. Last important slide. I told you that there was free pizza and beer. Why is free pizza and beer a mistake? Everyone likes free pizza and beer, right? No, they don't. Not everyone likes free pizza and beer. Think about the user group that you attend. It is probably mostly men. And when you're meeting in person, think about what it might be like to be a 20-something young woman who shows up and there's a bunch of older guys. Maybe they look like me. I'm kind of intimidating with my beard. Maybe once you get to know me, I'm not, but when you walk into a room, if there's a room full of me, that could be intimidating. Now we're all going to get drunk. We're going to drink beer. You don't know if we're going to get drunk, but we're all going to be drinking beer. Is a young woman going to be comfortable in that situation? Maybe not. There's not saying you can't have free pizza and beer at your user group sometimes, but maybe don't lead with it. At my user group, I will admit our venue provides free pizza and beer for our meetups in Boston. They pay for it. They give us access to the taps. It's at my employer. The user group has access to the taps if people want to drink beer. We also have access to water. Those are the options. There's water on tap here and there's beer on tap here. Have either one. There's no soda in the building at all, not even for employees. So it's not free pizza and beer, it's free refreshments. You can market it different. Don't lead with free beer, because a lot of my attendees love being able to grab a pint and sit down, but it's not about drinking. That's not what we're there for. And I mean, even pizza. I'll be honest, I've had so much user group pizza in my life. I don't want a slice of pizza when I go to user group. I'm more likely to go to the user group if it's taco night or something like that. So keep that in mind. And then, not to mention that pizza is like super American frat party pizza and beer. Well, other people, maybe there's some, like, sushi might be too expensive to do, but maybe there's a Thai place where you can get, some pad Thai or something like that. Keep those things in mind when you're, if you're an event organizer or if you're an attendee. Have that difficult conversation with your user group organizer. I know a lot of them. If it's a SQL Server user group, ping me. I will try to facilitate that conversation. Unlike, when we start getting back together and having in-person meetings, can we do something other than free pizza and beer? It would be more welcoming to me because, and it'll be a hard conversation, but it's an important one. All right, I finally talked about free pizza and beer. I talked for 3 minutes longer than I intended to. If you have further questions and you want me to answer them thoughtfully in a written format, please feel free to go to this Menti link, type in this code. I would love, even if you don't have questions, to answer those first 3 questions for me. And then if you do have questions, ask me anything. Do we have questions that are in the chat that I can answer in my last 15 or so minutes?
Yes, we have one. How do we differentiate between genuine unfairness and other person's unreasonable expectations?
That is an excellent question. And there is no one answer. The best way to do it is to assume good intent. Assume that the person is making a good faith argument or asking an honest question. Usually, as you get into the conversation, you can figure it out. Someone approached me at a SQL Saturday. It was, I think it was SQL Saturday in Louisville. And he came up to me and made a comment to me that I remember. about how basically what he said was he was a dick on Twitter. And I responded to him in a way that was kind of very mature, and he realized that he was being a dick just from the way that I responded, and he was very thankful. I don't even remember that interaction happening, but I remember when he came up to me and commented on the fact that I was, I forget the exact word that he used, but he said that I was mature in responding to him when he was not. And essentially I had assumed good intent. Regardless of his intent, by assuming good intent, having a conversation, it helped him have a good experience with it. And it was obviously, I didn't have a bad experience, or else I probably would have remembered it. But just assume good intent. There have also been people on the internet where I've started to engage, and then I'm like, you know what, never mind, mute, block, I don't have time for you. You figure it out as you kind of get into it. So along those lines, I'll go back to scroll up through my slides, go back to this slide here, right? I don't know that person's intent. Maybe the person that wrote this letter that about us flying our pride flag out front being offensive to them, maybe those two sentences didn't accurately convey what they wanted to say. My response could have been to call them a bigot and say all of these mean things. While I don't think they had great intent, my response was one where I assumed that they needed education, that they weren't being malicious, that it was ignorance, not malice. And I think that if you take that approach, you can at least start that conversation on a good foot. You do your part to have that conversation on a good foot. And if it doesn't go well, then you absolutely should be like, you know what? We are not getting anywhere. Never mind. And that's it. That's all you can do. Like you'll have bad experiences, those uncomfortable conversations where you start the uncomfortable conversation, you're trying to be the bigger person, end up devolving and being unconstructive. And like society sucks, it will happen. So this is the slide I mentioned earlier. I encourage you, if you've stayed with us this long, I encourage you to download the slides, am2.co/free-pizza. Download the slides, take a look at that reading, think about it. That's all I ask. And think about how you can be kind to one another. That's all I have for the evening. We've got a few more minutes on the schedule. I'm happy to just sit here and chit chat if folks don't have questions, comments, problems, or answers for me.
Thank you so much, Andy. That was so awesome. I really especially like that last point too, because I feel like, you know, if I was putting myself forward in a way that wasn't really representative of what I believe in or my character, I'd want the benefit of the doubt, right? So we have to expand that onto others where, you know, we all have blind spots in our perception of things and our knowledge of things, and we can easily have those slip ups, those, oh, I messed up, what do I do now moments. But it's really just what you do first and then what you do after that incident, right? You know, right. You made a note of it and you're like, and I will be better. Yeah, and for them, maybe that's their moment as well.
I have no illusion that I am always a nice person. I am absolutely a jerk sometimes. And I'm sure that if you ask around, someone will tell you what an asshole I am. And maybe it was a bad day. Maybe it was intentional. Maybe I was in a bad mood. Who knows? But when a good person is sometimes an asshole, which we are, sometimes all it takes is for someone to be like, hey, Andy, you're an asshole. And then you think about it. And then it gives you that ability to figure it out.
I don't know. I don't have the same experience because I'm often a smaller woman and it's a big guy who's being a jerk to me, and I never feel comfortable. It's really hard for me to do stuff like that.
That's
Especially
definitely
at a vendor party at 1 o'clock in the morning, at a conference, like people have been drinking and someone's being a dick.
and that's another important thing. You need to be self-aware about yourself enough to know that sometimes the best thing to do is to say, okay.
Yeah, totally. You need to know when
100%.
to walk away.
And make a mental note too, right? It's on, like, we want to create these spaces that are safe spaces, but also, like, personally, my approach is, when I have these incidents come up, it's, I do my best to try the course, build a healthy relationship, but sometimes some people just aren't worth it. And if, I notice those microaggressions or just aggressions in general keep happening, then it's like, I don't know if I really need to have this person be in my life.
Oh, someone's video froze.
He froze.
He's over it. He's over it.
The other really helpful thing in the exact scenario that you described, Blythe, is you're at a conference and you're at a vendor party and people are drinking and someone's an asshole to you. You have friends that are allies for you who you can immediately get yourself out of that situation, and then talk to someone. I mentioned earlier that if someone wanted to have a conversation with their SQL Server user group leader, feel free to send me an email or contact me and I can try to help facilitate that. Blythe, you specifically have friends that can help facilitate some of those conversations. So if there's a big dude who's been drinking, that is not the time or place to have that conversation, but maybe the next day you talk to one of your friends and you say, Andy was like obnoxious and rude and he said these things to me which were really offensive. And then your friend says, oh, well, I don't think Andy is usually like that. Like, we can talk it out and maybe you have a conversation with a little Kiki with all of you and you get together and you talk about it, or maybe that person just goes and says,
you just say Kiki.
I certainly did.
I love it.
And if anyone does not get the reference, go on YouTube and search for Have a Kiki music video. It's a great music video.
It is up there.
But it's the kind of thing where like maybe it's not a kumbaya moment, but it's just someone can if I was that jerk at that party, someone can come up to me and say, hey Andy, I heard you were a real jerk last night. And if you have a mutual friend or someone that knows that person, or you've just got a big brother. And I think it was yesterday I tweeted, what day of the week is it today? Today's Tuesday? Yeah, yesterday. I tweeted, someone commented on thanking Brent for the newsletter that he put out, that he had me curate that newsletter. And I commented that, Brent is one of my biggest allies in the community. He's one of my big brothers that I know I can go to if I have a problem. And even if Brent doesn't know the person, I know that Brent will have my back. And not everyone, but most people have a friend that can have their back like that. And sometimes it's just going to that friend and finding that emotional, psychologically secure spot to have that conversation, to talk out like that guy that was a jerk to you, even if you don't confront them, even if you have no idea who they are, being able to go to that friend, find your safe space and have that conversation, talk it out. That's a good rubber ducky debugging moment to make sure that like, wait, it was like, I'm not out of line here, right? That guy was a jerk. And sorting out some of that can help validate you and make sure that you didn't do something wrong.
Totally.
All right. Well,
Well,
guys.